Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Redeemed Not Forsaken, episode 2. I'm your host, Emma,
I'm Julia.
and welcome back. We're excited. We have decided we're gonna start a series, and would you like to share on
Yeah,
what the series is
so I saw TikTok, which I like for real. God just speaks to me through TikToks all the time. That's yeah, crazy. But it was Cliff. Shout out Cliff. He has the best TikTok stuff. Um, and he was talking to this girl, and he was talking about how God answers prayers in 4 ways. He said, made it very simple, very catchy. He said God will say no, God will say slow, God will say grow, or God will say go. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the basis of this series that we want to start, is just like sparking this idea of like what prayer looks like, how God responds in these 4 ways, and then like for the next couple episodes, just like breaking down what each of those ways looks like, and some biblical text to kind of back it up, because base everything off of the word.
about.
Everything you
So
hear.
get your Bibles out, get a cup of hot chocolate if it's like cold like today. It's terrible,
Literally.
and yeah, let's get into it. I feel like we should break it down with the word, and then we can talk about our own personal stuff,
Yeah,
experiences with it.
for sure.
So yeah, I think the first thing we should do is open our Bibles to Mark 14 verses
Yeah.
32 through 41. Maybe that is Daniel. Wow, my Bible is so big. Okay.
Mark, where you at? Okay.
Dead. Anyways, okay, so for context, Jesus had the disciples at the Last Supper, and then before that, Jesus was like, "Yo, my guy Peter, you're gonna deny me," and Peter was like, "What, Lord? I never do that to you."
Not
And
me.
then, yeah, literally, and then they were like, Jesus was like, "Yo, it's time to go to Gethsemane," and he was like, "Hey, let's go and pray. Like, I need to go and pray." And then Jesus, Peter, James, and John were distressed, and yeah, okay, I'll just read the text. So we'll just read the whole thing. Jesus agonizes in the garden. They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus said, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and fell to the ground. He prayed that, if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. "Abba, Father," he cried out, "everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done and not mine." We're actually just going to stop there, and we're just going to break down. I think we should break down what he says in verse 35,
Yeah.
and then what he says in 36, and how they complement and contrast each other very well. So you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this idea of like mine's kind of split between pages, but like we were reading this verse the first time, just kind of breaking down this concept of like where his heart is postured when he's praying this.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is not asking like out of his own selfish wants and his own just shallow, I guess, desires that God, this is too much. Like I don't want it. Take it. No, like he's asking from a place of deep pain and sorrow and probably fear, but also trusting in faith. And like we said, verse 36, like, yet not what I will, but what you will.
Mm-hmm.
And asking the Father's will and not his own, and recognizing that.
Mhm. Okay, so I think a way that we can relate, kind of like going the opposite of where you're saying, is like when he's asked, like, going to pray, he's going to pray because he wants this awful thing to be done. I was watching a video today at lunch, and this guy named Ruslan was talking about how some prayers aren't answered because sometimes God wants us to go to the cross and die. And this is literally like the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Because Jesus did not want to go through this waiting, but God had another plan, and God said, no, like, you're going to go through this.
Mm.
But then also at the same time, like, Jesus having a faith is saying, yet I want your will to be done and not mine.
Mm.
And I think not only saying no, like God saying no is important, but like we'll talk more on this in like later episodes, but like acting on him saying no, and like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like, I'm thinking of this idea too of remembering that Jesus was completely man. Like there is an aspect of him that is obviously like divine, and he has an abundance of the spirit that we'll never have. You know, like he
Mm,
has access to God because he is God, like he is divine in and of himself. But like recognizing that like this is Jesus asking out of his humanity.
mm,
Um and something that I've been wrestling a lot with switching to theology is this idea of like how much did Jesus know and how much did he not know? Because there's a lot in the Gospels that point to this idea of like he's doing the will of the Father, like he says he's sent by the Father. He wants his Father's will, like he is submitting and being obedient to the Father, acting with him in that plan of redemption and restoration. Um, but he also has revelation, and my coach and I were talking about this idea too of like much, if not everything, that Jesus understood in his humanity was revealed to him by the Spirit. And this idea of like, in this moment, like asking the question of, had the Spirit revealed to him yet that this was the only way? Because there has to be like a sense in God sending him and him being like, yes, I obey, I submit, that he understood that like this was the only way this was going to happen.
mm-hmm,
And like whether or not he knew initially what the exact way that was going to be looked like or not, I don't think we can really say, or I'm not equipped to really answer that question. I'm still looking for those kind of answers, obviously. But um like, yeah, even if he, I think the most powerful way to think about it is if Jesus did not know when he said, yes, I will go down and become flesh and dwell among them to atone for their sins, if he didn't know the means by which that was going to happen,
mm-hmm,
when it happened, or when he became flesh, and when if it was revealed to him while he was human, like in his life on earth, knowing that he chose to come to earth initially and become flesh without the full plan in mind, and knowing that the Father's will is always better, like whatever God says is the way to go, is the way to go, and he just trusted that, and like not blindly, like having faith that like he's never failed before, he will do it again, his way is better, his plan is better, and Jesus has been witness to that since the beginning of creation. And this, yeah, just this idea of like from our side too, I think it's really encouraging that if Jesus did not know the exact means by which everything was going to happen when he became flesh, like he was still able to take that step of faith in becoming flesh, the same way that as humans we're expected to take that step of faith and act in our humanity and trust God and his provision and his calling and the acts that he asks us to step into, because he's done it before. He'll do it again.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so now that I feel like we've broken down this text, I feel like we should talk a little bit before we get into like the next piece.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about on a personal level, like, how has God said no to you, and
Mm.
how Like how have you seen either it work out in God's plan, or like how are you dealing it with right now if you're dealing with him saying no
Yeah.
to some
Like it's a no and
unanswered
I'm
prayers?
like upset about it. Oh, thanks.
I got you.
What?
I don't know. It looked like dead skin, and I was like looking at it while you were talking,
Okay.
and I was
I
like,
appreciate it. I appreciate
I
it.
gotta get it.
Um
Anyways.
yeah. um saying no in the back. I mean, I want to say it's silly, but it's not really silly. Of just like a lot of times, like the way that God says no to me most often is just like with guys,
Mm,
and like this concept of like I'll like see someone and I don't know. I'm someone who really like it sounds cheesy, but I'm like, God, if he's the one, like, please make it work. Or if he's not,
mm-hmm.
that Amazon shipping prayer, take him out of my life, and next day he's ghosted, he's gone. But like this idea of like for some reason, like that is one area of my life that I really, really struggle to just be like,
Mm,
God, your way, your timing. When you say no, I'm gonna accept that that person is not in my life for a reason. And I
mm,
know, like, I'm pretty sure I said that last week. And like not reaching out to someone because I really have to like remind myself to trust that like God took them out of my life for a reason. If it's
mm-hmm.
meant to be, they'll come back, but they're gone right now. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something else he's calling you to do. Like that is a no. And even like recognizing like the no and not right now, and that kind of goes into like the slow that we're gonna break down too. And like just acknowledging like areas of my life. I think the easiest thing for me to forget is just this concept of like in the areas of my life where God is saying no to the specific things that I'm asking for or a request in this season for him to fulfill. If he's saying no and it's something I know that he's promised me, like reminding myself that like it's a no to this thing. It's
Mm,
not a no to the promise, because if I know in my spirit, if he has affirmed to me in just who I am in my life and the things that he's gifted me in and the just things that I know that he has promised and he has in my plan, if he's saying no to this specific way of that in this season, like remembering that that's not a no to that promise, it's a no to
mm,
this way of doing it. And
mm,
like kind of connecting it back to Jesus' prayer in the garden, like God is not saying like no, I'm not gonna like acknowledge that you have a different desire than what I do in this season. He's saying like in this time, in this season, like it's a no. Like this is the way it has to happen. And like I think a lot of the times we hear him saying no out of anger.
mm.
And it's like it's truly like when I hear God saying no, it's like I'm sorry, but no.
No,
Like,
yeah.
I want the best for you, and me saying yes to this thing would not be the best thing for you.
Mm,
Like, it's all out of love and care. And I think there comes a time of frustration when you ask continuously, and he'll just be like, go do it. Go do it. See what happens. And he gets frustrated when there's a very clear no. And there's so many funny TikToks about this where it's like, God, like I need a sign, and then he'll just give like a really clear sign, and he's like, well, maybe that wasn't a sign. Like I need another sign, like those kind of
yeah,
videos.
yeah.
But like, yeah, just recognizing that him saying no in this season doesn't mean a no to that promise forever. I think guys is a big way, but like a more tangible thing, I guess, is just like my plans for the future, and that sounds very
Mm,
general, but
no.
like I did not expect myself to ever be playing college golf in the state of Iowa at Dordt University. Like that was not in my
Mm,
5-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old brain. Like that plan was not anywhere in there. When I was 5, I wanted to be the president. I was like, I'm going big, go home. When I was 10, like I had this dream. My parents both went to the University of Colorado. Like I 100% thought I was gonna go to CU Boulder, whatever career that looked like. When I was 15, I was like, I'm going to do biomedical, chemical engineering, and I'm going to do allergy research because I feel like that's the call that God has placed on my life. And like recognizing that me trying to discern his will was not a bad thing, but my conclusion of what his will for my life was incorrect. And like in that time, I was taking steps towards a calling that wasn't actually the calling he had placed on my life that I thought it was. that was twisted, and recognizing too that like I had taken steps in the wrong direction and it ended up on the right path. And like very encouraged by that fact of like I don't have to be right all the time because he's going to straighten things out. He's going to order my steps. Like when he says no to the plan I had in my past, but I'm taking steps towards that plan because I don't hear a very clear no, like recognizing that there's a no, like I'm feeling like the best way to put this, I don't really know how to articulate it, but in my head it's like a progressive no. Like he's like saying no over time. You know, like doors are closing over time slowly and it's like a no over time so that he's like course correcting over time. Like it's not just like you were wrong, here's your no, and now you're just like totally in the wrong place.
Yeah, and I like one thing like one of my like guy friends told me is like when God closes, like if you don't necessarily, I guess this is kind of theological, like because some people like think like God like already knows like everything, but then some people have, well, like I feel like he knows everything, but then some people like believes he knows everything, but he also gives you like free will. But anyways, we're gonna go on the like free will thing, and so like let's say you choose the thing that like God didn't really have in store for you, he's gonna work in that either way.
Yeah.
But like if you choose the thing that God has in store for you, like you'll clearly see the fruit produce. Not saying like fruit won't produce. I mean, it definitely depends on the circumstance and situation.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's so good. And that's a conversation that really cleared things up for me too. Is just this idea of like, why does God give me free will if His will is better, you know? And this idea of like, sometimes I don't want my free will. I don't always make the best choices with my
But then
free
like
will.
if gosh, this is my last thing because otherwise this
I know
will
this
turn
is
into
gonna
a
have
whole
to be
nother
a different thing.
But like sometimes if we didn't like ever, God gives us that choice, but like if he handed everything to us, then like we wouldn't really have testimonies, I feel like,
Yeah,
because
that's
we
so
wouldn't
true.
have gone through the things that we have gone through. And yeah, anyways,
We wouldn't have faith either. You know, it has to
yeah,
be a choice.
yeah,
Obedience and all these things. But we'll do another free will because that's like a whole.
that's a long thing.
Yeah, we could
Okay,
talk about that all day.
so for me, a few things. Well, I'll talk about the now. God has definitely called me um to just be still. And so as like I tore my ACL, and I love like everyone who knows me, like I love working out, I love protein. I just love being active. And since like other circumstances have arisen, I haven't been leaning into those circumstances, and I've been leaning into sports. And God is like, hey, like what happened? I thought we got over this idolization, and so like I've been praying, like God, like just let me like be completely healthy in all of this, and like God, I just want to be like the starter in all of this, and but I also pray like God, like let your will be done at over every prayer, and like God, just take my life and take over. And he I'm out, like I'm gonna get surgery, and he's telling me like, no, Emma, like you need to stop being busy and you need to focus on me. And that's like another thing, like before this, like me and my last boyfriend, like we broke up, and that's been like pretty hard, but like God has been telling me like, no, you need to be obedient to me before you can fully submit to a man, which has been really hard because I've always desired like a man. And like I've always been in relationships, but God has told me no, like not yet. Like I'm not saying that won't ever happen, Emma, but you need to be still in me. And I know you made this goal to fully deny yourself of your flesh every day and submit yourself to me, which is great. So we're going to do that. And I think one thing I wrote in my notes is listening, acting, and following. And when God says no, you need to listen to him say no, follow, and then following isn't just going through the motions, it's acting on that as well. And so, like, me having to be obedient to him saying no to these things has been hard, but I know at the end of the day, like, it's in God's will and not mine. Just like how Jesus, he knew that he needed to do this, but necessarily he didn't want to. And it was the same thing with me with the breakup. Like, I know I needed to do this and I didn't necessarily want to. And I am doing it because at the end of the day, it's God's will, not mine. And the same thing with the ACL. Like, I don't, like, I don't technically need surgery. I really do, but like I don't really need it. Like I could quit sports and all of that, but like I it's what I need to do for God's will. Like and my own health obviously cuz like in the long term it's just better, but like being able to just do it for God's will and not your own is something that's hard for everybody, but something like I'm really have been excited for in this new season of my life because I know a bunch. No catfish. That's a thing we have in my friend group. Anyways, back to the seriousness. We we tend to um I'm really lost and not focused now.
Yeah, we gotta keep this part in. That was so funny.
Because if someone says catfish and you don't say no catfish, you have to flop on the ground and go like.
That's crazy.
I'll show you a video after this.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, but yeah. So how in the past how God has said no to me is I don't know. Honestly, I think I'm gonna just leave it at where it was because I think that was good.
That was really good.
Yeah.
Lucky too. Like it made me think of like the danger of prayer. Like I said, like that Amazon should be prayer, but your prayer too. That just like you're like I want to be obedient and I want to like die to myself every day. And he like yeah, he gonna answer that prayer the exact way you don't want him to. You know, like that is so true. Like every time I think it's funny. Like every time I like interpret God's answer as a no, like it's usually a yes in the exact way that I don't want it, but like in the way that I need it.
No, I literally say this like I always put prayers like after my devotionals or my notes from my Bible. Like literally one of it's God, I give my life to you. Now go and change it. Another one, God, change me and take over my life. Um, I give I give this life to you. Do whatever you want so I can glorify you. And just like always praying that he just does his will and not my own. It's just I feel like that's very important in answering when he says no. And just being patient as well. But yeah. Okay, so Julia, you want to talk about the Lord's Prayer and how that like responding to your will not mine kind of ties in with that.
Yeah, when we were reading that verse earlier, um like thinking about this concept of like when we pray, like God knows what we need. Like we're not praying to make God aware of the things that we want or need. Like he knows our hearts and he knows our desires. It's primarily to establish relationship and intimacy with him. Like get in his presence and like have those conversations. Get to know him. And like making it a conversation, like praying and listening, and like the way that Jesus frames his prayer, um, is I just love it, and I have kind of like an annotation of it, like rewriting it in my own words a little bit, and this idea of like we start this prayer with Our Father in heaven, like we are your children, we are acknowledging that we are under your authority, and you are seated enthroned forever, like hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, being like let everyone declare who you are. You are holy forever. Your will, your way, your reign. Like when we hear kingdom, like it is God's reign and His authority over the world. Um, give us provision each day. Give us this day our daily bread. Talking about like the manna and like God providing for them. every single day. Forgive us our debts, and like God, like we recognize that we are sinners, and like the punishment that we and the judgment that we cast on other people's are we are getting ourselves. So like give us a clean heart, give us a clear mind, so that we can be forgiving people. And then kind of ending it with like lead us not into temptation but deliver us from evil. And that's where the next two verses that I kind of want to go into, like God be our fortress, keep us from the things that tempt us and pull us away from you, deliver us from the attacks of the enemy that come to steal, kill, and destroy. Um, and two verses that kind of connect to that for me that we were talking about in church the other day is this idea of when Jesus rebukes Peter for trying to stop his mission and stop the calling that God has placed on his life, trying to convince him that he doesn't have to go to the cross. And the first one is in Mark chapter 8, verse 33. And Jesus says to Peter, but turning and seeing his disciples, he rebukes Peter and said, get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. And that kind of connects back to what we were saying earlier about, like, let your will be done, Lord. Like, I have a narrow vision. I have a narrow mind to the big picture and your plan. Let that be done. And, like, anything apart from that is against him. Like, not, I don't want to say like everything is an attack from the enemy. That's like our own desire. Like, we very much have our own will as well, but just the idea of like you becoming your own obstacle and the things God wants to do in your life because you are seeking things out of your own narrow mind and out of the mind of man and the will of man and not God's. And the concept too of like we see it in Job and we see it again in Luke chapter 22 verses verse 31. Luke chapter 2, 22. Sorry, Luke chapter 2, 31. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat. But I prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And that one, like for me, just very encouraging too, that like when Jesus is praying in the garden, when we see him just, yeah, really struggling through this, recognizing that God has to give Satan permission in God's authority. God has reign and rule over all things. God has to give Satan permission to test you. And in this verse, it's saying, like, Satan asked God to have Peter in this moment so that he would test his faith, so that he would bring trial against him. And recognizing that Jesus is praying, Jesus is interceding, God is never going to allow Satan to do something to you that is going to completely destroy you. Like, even the crucifixion of Jesus, like, in this moment, he's saying, like, God, like, please take this cup away. Do it another way. Like, this is the worst pain and death imaginable. And God is allowing Satan to do this to him. Like, Satan is the one who ultimately working through the powers at the time crucified Jesus, you know? And, like, God had to permit that to happen. And, like, recognizing that the only reason that that is the way that it happened and allowing Satan to do what he did is because that was not the end. And, like, this is coming out at the perfect time, like Easter and being, like, the resurrection and the crucifixion and, like, this concept of God will never allow Satan to do something to you that will bring you to your end. Like, he will protect and provide, be your fortress in that way of, like, he will not let you fail once and for all. Like, there is redemption, there is restoration in his story time and time again, like from the beginning. And yeah, just a lot of encouragement in that to kind of sum it up, wrapping up and connecting it back to like the will in the garden, like framing our prayers around like you were saying in your journal, like every prayer ending like God, like this is all my wants, these are all my needs, this is what I'm asking of you, this is what I would just want to tell you, this is what I feel like I'm hearing from you, correct that if not, but like your will in all things be done. Like take this life and use it for your will, recognizing too that like we have a limited mindset, being like that verse saying like you have your mind set on the things of man, and then the last thing just being like God will never allow Satan to bring you down ultimately.
Okay, before the rest of this clip plays out, I just want to say we lost about 10 minutes of our audio because our mics died. So yeah, we had to redo that. The rest of this video is just talking about announcements, so you can either continue watching or log off. Either ways, we're thankful and we hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. Okay, so we have to vlog on my phone. We don't use my phone to record.
We don't.
But we reshot this clip 2 times already because the audio on the mics died, and obviously Satan just now want us to get through announcements.
For real.
So, long story short, either every other Thursday or every Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be uploading the podcast. We've just been busy trying to figure out schedules and stuff. Follow our Instagram at Redeemend Not Forsaken.
Yes.
You can either message us privately or message the Instagram, and we'd love to be praying for you. Let us know if you have any questions or anything.
Thanks.
And we're excited to continue this series. The end.
Love y'all.
Woo, bye.